Your source is within you. It doesn't live in another human being. But what often happens with us as humans is we get into relationships and we immediately forget that the same source we're seeing in them is in us too. And so we rely on them. We rely on them for our happiness. We rely on them for validation. We rely on them for reassurance. We rely on them for comfort. We rely on them for love. And we lose ourselves in the source that we see in them because we're separating. We're separating ourselves. We're forgetting that what we see in them is in us. So then what ends up developing from separation is jealousy. I had somebody send me a message the other day and ask me if I could talk a little bit about jealousy, and I said I'd be more than happy to explain what jealousy means spiritually. When you're jealous, it's because you believe that you're lacking something and this other person has access to it, but you don't. You believe you're not good enough. And maybe you believe that your partner makes you feel good enough. But if your partner is not keeping up with validating your enoughness, you might start to get suspicious and create stories in your mind. Search through people's phones. Sign on to their social media sites. Looking for evidence of this fear. And people do some crazy shit when they're jealous, right? People come up with crazy stories and crazy ideas because they're in need of control, because they're trying to control something that is outside of them, when really all the control lives in here. So here I am, and I'm in this relationship, and I've made you my source. And when you don't keep up with your end of the bargain that you know nothing about, I then get upset. And I rely on you more to be my source. And when you fail, because you're always going to fail, because you're not my source, I'm going to get angry. And I'm going to get resentful. And I might come up with a story. I might come up with some crazy story that you've become somebody else's source. And believing that I'm not good enough because you've now replaced me with a new source. Do you see how crazy that sounds? But it feels so real in those moments, right? And it comes down to this simple concept. The source that you see in them is in you. The same source in them is in you. They are not separate from you. All the control lives in you. All the control. You can't control them. And the more you try to, the more you're going to fail. You cannot manipulate them and make them do things in order to rise up to feeding that wound inside of you. Your denial of your own source makes you then chase after them, cling to them, become needy of them, and rely on them for everything that you can give yourself. And when they fail, because it's not their job to do that, and once you get a little hit from them, you're going to need a little more, right? And then you get a little more, and then you want even more. And they're never going to be able to keep up with it because it's got to come from you first. And then you search for all of these other external reasons on why they're not giving it to you. But that's all feeding this illusion of lack internally. You have the power to fill all your needs from within you. And when you attract things externally to you, it's a reflection of what's happening in you. But it's you forgetting that you created this external experience from within, so you separate it and you think it's got something you don't. Come back home to yourself and realize that everything you're needing, wanting, desiring, craving lives in your heart. And when you see it outside of you, take it as validation that it's in you. Don't think it's separate from you. Remind yourself it's within you. And maintain that power, that connection to your source, no matter where you are or who you're in front of. And I promise you, you'll never lose yourself again. And if you do, you'll have a reminder to come back home again to you.